Welcome to the Page Spring Conference. Chris is a friend, mentor.
Look at you.
Colleague, partner in crime, dating back to 20 years ago plus.
Yes.
At Burson Marsteller. He was one of the first people I think I met when I joined Burson in 2000, and was the healthcare expert down the hall. So when I had a question, I would run to Chris, who would explain it. Then became, over years, US CEO of then BCW, and was plucked from that position to become the CEO of Omnicom, which didn't surprise anyone, because he's one of the smartest people I know. But it's a very different kind of business than just being the CEO of a public relations firm. So how's it going?
So slight correction. The CEO of Omnicom Group is John Wren.
Sorry, Omnicom Public Relations Group, my apologies. I don't want to foreshadow anything, but that's the next role.
So Brian's right. I mean, I appreciate being here. Thank you. And the feeling's mutual as far as friendship and mentorship over the years. And congratulations on a great conference. I've heard nothing but great things from it, and I'm glad for us to be a part of it. So interestingly, when I first took the position about 2 years ago, all the news media I'd talked to had one question, and they kept trying to trick me, because I'd asked the question lots of different ways, and the question was, are you going to collapse, all the agencies within OPRG to create one big company? And I just thought there would be nothing worse I could do to sort of break OPRG than try to force everyone together as one. We have, as part of Omnicom Public Relations Group, a collective of roughly 21 iconic agencies, each with their own identity, very unique identity, different yet sometimes complementary suite of offerings. And what I want to do is protect and grow that. There are times when we have to go to market, when I want to go to market as OPRG. And there are times when, and I see Michael over there, I want to go to market as Michael Mislansky and Mislansky and Partners, or Ketchum, or Fleischman, or MMC. And one of the things that I've tried to do over the past 2 years is support the agencies on their journeys, because everyone's on a journey, but then drive a level of integration across OPRG to begin to deliver a different suite of solutions for our clients globally. I find it's tough in today's market for one agency to be able to do everything for a global enterprise. But if I can if I can try to create the best teams throughout the network, it tends to work better. And then the next question that follows, this is a long answer to a short question, but you're probably used to it, is, well, how do you get the agencies to work together? All right? And
we used to hate that.
Oh, hated it.
Right,
no,
somebody would say, bring in the partner, because your P&L is golden. You don't want to share, right?
When I was at BCW, it would never occur to me to sort of share revenue with another agency. But the very simple answer is they all kind of report up to me. So it takes a lot of the sort of the confusion out of it. But you have to respect that conflicts exist. You have to respect the fact that not all not all agencies are created equal, in that sometimes it may not make sense. So it's a careful balance, but I think I'm really pleased with how we've tried to integrate to meet clients' needs globally, and that does require some education as well for clients and our agencies.
So we're talking about influence these past couple days. How much time do you spend with your teams versus with clients, and how do you influence those clients?
Yeah, so what's unique, I think, about me is I'm a practitioner. I love the work we do. I love this industry. I built a career in it, so I'm very active in clients, both as counseling clients, but then also as in the new business and growth process, right? I love that. I'm just energized by growth. It's a team sport, and it allows me also to interact with the client teams and the staff around the world through the work. I think we're all connected by the work, so I want to spend a lot of time in work. I also have to manage the P&L. I influence clients in a couple different ways. It really depends, but data for me, I'm in love with data, and I think I'm really pleased with, although I want us to lean in more as an industry, with the use of data science and analytics and how it has actually helped inform the way we practice communications. So especially when you look at influencer advocacy, I do think the secret weapon for that for us is embracing and leaning in a very different way to data science and how that will challenge some sensibilities, change a conversation with a client, but also get us to think differently about the types of questions we should be asking in order to influence and shape some of our clients' campaigns. So that's a primary way to get that done.
We always, in the public relations industry, pride ourselves on good judgment, right? And the sort of experience we bring to the table, and it's almost intuitive. It's not really data-driven, right? Guide us through, as you see it, the difference between marketing and comms, and what do we tend to ignore as communications professionals with those geeks in the marketing department, right? Who are data-driven and that we could learn from.
So I'd say two things. Look, the difference in marketing and comms at its basics, very, very basic level is marketing really is about sales, right? Promoting in sales, and I think PR is much more about reputation management. Now, what's interesting is in sort of today's world, there's much more of a connection between a lot of our PR and comms programs linking back to real business outcomes, which I really love to see, and I think we need to continue to lean into that. Here's the learning and the disconnect, and I'm probably going to get run out of here. I think we need to surrender to data science and data. I think we're too precious as PR practitioners about the gut, about experience, about this is what happened, this is how I did it 2 years ago. Data science, analytics, that is not going to replace us, I don't believe, as professionals. It'll only allow us to operate with more precision, to be more surgical in our programming, to begin to evaluate the campaigns and the programs in real time every day instead of waiting until the end of a campaign. So I think we're a little too precious about the trade. I don't think we have fully embraced. Intellectually, I think we get the fact that data is important. There's a reason we can use data to answer questions, to figure out what questions to ask, all that stuff. But I do think we're still a little precious. And we haven't really leaned in and embraced data across the board for our industry. Now, here's the dilemma. I don't think we need new modalities or new algorithms at all. I think at this point for our industry, it's around change management. Right? I think we need to experience data and see what data and data science can do for us in real time to help us be better counselors. I think that's a lesson I think we should sort of glean from the marketers.
We're incredibly anxious about this whole topic. We spent a good deal of time yesterday talking about ChatGPT.
Sure.
And its potential to replace us big thinkers.
What did you guys decide?
I think we were mixed. We're intimidated by it slightly.
Okay.
We're impressed by the technology.
Sure.
I think the conclusion is that it will be additive rather than replace the skills that we bring to the table. But the question, I guess, is what are clients asking you and your teams for? Are they asking you more for that experience and judgment, or do they want us to rock up with, okay, show me the latest data, what do my consumers want, how do I manage my reputation in this day and age?
Neither. They want a solution to a problem, right? So I think it's really, we should just simplify this a bit, right? I think at the end of the day, as practitioners, we should spend more time trying to diagnose a client's problem. If we can diagnose it, then within all of us in the room or your organizations, you're better off solving it. I think we try to, I don't think we spend enough time in that diagnosis, even the brief behind the brief behind the brief. So I think that, in and of itself will be incredibly powerful for us as a profession. So, when I'm engaging with a client, I spend a lot of time trying to truly understand, before I sell, I'm not trying to sell. I want to understand the problem I'm trying to solve. And if I can do that, I think we're better off.
In terms of staying on the ChatGPT topic,
Sure.
And the disruption, right? You're talking about an industry that's in a constant state of of being disrupted or people trying to disrupt it.
Sure.
If you look 5 years out, what do you foresee as the challenges from a CEO's perspective of either technology cutting into your future business or maybe adding to it? Like what's going to be the next big trend?
Well, I think we're living one of the most disruptive, but I think positive ones. I think AI talking to AI, right, is going to be something that would be exciting, right? So as a CEO, when I look out 3 to 5 years, I'm excited about our industry. I think AI, OpenAI, I think ChatGPT is going to be additive in a lot of respects. Look, we're not going to always get it right, and there are certainly some risks. But I think if you look at the actual platform it sits on, I mean, it's a there tend to be learning machines that get smarter and smarter the more you use them. So I would encourage practitioners to interact with the technology, right? And I encourage those in my organization to not be fearful or threatened by technology and data science. Interact with it and try to learn from it and try to understand it. We can't break it, right? So and at the end of the day, there is a role for experience and judgment in our business. 100%. We're a people business. Our experience and judgment matter. But I think to the extent that judgment and that experience can be informed by some technology, I think that's good. And here's why it's more important today to lean in to technology than ever. Just look how information moves. Information's a move. I could say it's about 90% of information moves digitally. I don't know that 98% is right. I just kind of made that up. But most information is moving digitally, right? So, and with that level of movement and the velocity of how information's moving, our jobs become impossible if we don't embrace and lean into technology in a real way. So we have to really think about how to use technology to do our jobs differently, which is exciting to me, right? And so one of the things that I'm trying to do, and it's taken a bit within OPRG agencies, is make the operating model, the operating system for the agency is a technology platform, right? So it'll inform everything we do about how we go to market, how we diagnose problems, how we build campaigns, how we measure campaigns on one operating model. Operating system, so that we see the power of technology in the work. And I think it's a bit of a journey, but we definitely have the technology to do that.
How do you think about where you've got consumers who want to do consumer or customer-generated content, right? They want to participate in the process versus just receive, right? So when you're talking to your teams, what are you seeing in terms of that trend?
So I don't think the practitioners, right, in agencies are the barrier there. I do think, unfortunately, it's on the client side, right? Both on marketing and comms. Gone are the days when consumers are sort of waiting patiently, for some news to come out on brand or agency X, right? In the absence of a company, delivering news, they're going to start a different conversation. So I think one of and it's taken some of the power away from marketers and in-house counsel in-house comms to know that the customers want to co-create content. So what I'm trying to do is try to create platforms and venues where we can actually co-create content. Doesn't mean you're going to surrender all of your marketer comms to your audience, but there's a lot of learning. I'd said this in a talk sometime last year. I mean, the market consumers will correct you if you're wrong, but we have to listen and be engaged and be willing to participate and co-create some level of content and innovation with our customers, which I think we're getting better at as a profession, but I think we should lean in to that a bit more. And again, it's not to surrender all comms to consumers, but at the end of the day, we should really pay attention to what audiences want. I think the sort of the modern little m, right, approach to influencers should be audience led. Really thinking about knowing the audience as well, if not better than they know themselves, so that you can be so relevant in some of the programming moving forward. So that's audience led. I think is sort of catching wind, but I think that's the immediate next frontier.
We've talked a lot about the merger between comms and marketing, right? The different specialties that at one point were very distinct, and now you have a significant amount of crossover in terms of audience targeting and in terms of who's buying your services. Is that a trend that's going to continue, do you think?
Definitely. I think so. Look, and I don't necessarily know that it's all bad, right? I mean, look, the one thing that, and having spent time in a management consulting firm, running a comms business, the one thing that we have as part of our trade and craft is earned, right? And earned is still important. Earned media is still quite important. It may look differently depending on a product or service, but it's very important. So I don't worry as much about consulting firms or ad agencies as marketers trying to infringe upon that. Just the way I would encourage us as practitioners to really look at, what I said before was surrender to data, look at data as a way to help us drive more precision and inform communications. I do think marketers are starting to see the power and the influence that PR can deliver around reputation strategy, managing reputations, and supporting a brand journey. Remember, a brand is a promise, right? It's a promise that sits at the expectation of sort of an experience, an expectation and an experience. So you have to focus on the experience. So much of our work now is starting to lean into the experience as PR practitioners. So I think it's actually a fairly good merger. I don't think we'll have one industry. But the lines will blur. And I am excited to see where that lands. I don't know where that'll land in the next 5 years, but we certainly are leaning into it. And what is informative for us at Omnicom is working in close collaboration with some of the ad network partners, right? And that's been both informative and at times challenging because there's a good bit of overlap at times. But working through that has been good for us as a profession.
How do you, we're talking about influence, how do you influence your company management teams, right? You have, 15 or so different companies?
I'm looking out at the room and some are here, so they're eager to hear. I don't think I influence them at all. Michael, what do you think? I mean, anyway. Look, here's what I've tried to do. I think I've got the best and probably some days the worst job in the industry. It's the best because I think I work with some of the best and brightest CEOs in the business. I really do love them, and they're all not sort of meeting me at the same place at the same time always. But to be sort of the CEOs of CEOs is good, right? I have found that a collaboration and partnership it's sort of an influence through partnership. Certainly, there are times when at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision. And popular or unpopular, it is. That's the job of a CEO, and I think everyone in the room knows that. But to the extent that I can partner and collaborate, it's easier. Now, what's interesting about OPRG is, and I've said this a few times, but let me explain it. Like, not all agencies are created equal. It's not that I don't love all of them, but I have some that are sort of global full service, like an FH or a Ketchum, a Porto Novelli. Then I have sort of more strategic consulting companies like a Daggerwing or Miss Lansky and Partners, and then more public affairs focused, like a Mercury or a DDC. So one of the things I've tried to do is educate Omnicom and try to manage, not as one big cluster of agencies and not as individual agencies, but maybe we could look at these full service agencies and what their needs are, and the public affairs and corporate agencies, what their needs are, and then the consulting firms. So it allows us to invest differently, partner differently, and I think that's been successful. And I think the agency CEOs sort of appreciate that as well. And it's less of a distraction. I believe, OPRG, the management team, is in service of the agencies, very much so. And I think that's helped us get there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it feels...
It's not satisfying.
No, it feels to me a bit like being a Major League Baseball commissioner, right? Where you're looking after all these teams, and some of them are going to be ultimately more successful than others, right?
That's true.
And back in the day, when Sir Martin was our Uber boss, we loved it as much as we didn't. Let's be honest, and that's tough. It's tough to be in a CEO role. Who influences you?
Oh, geez. Well, my partner at home and my 17-year-old son probably have the greatest influence of me. It's an interesting question and an interesting dynamic that I've seen over the last probably 2.5 years in the workplace. Employees. Employees now are becoming more vocal and have a strong opinion about the type of work we take on, how we go to market, what purpose means to them, who we are, how we show up for them. So employees have become a source of inspiration for me. At times it's a challenge, but they're great influencers to how I do my work every day. So that's one, in addition to the family I mentioned. That's a big one. And I truthfully, if you think about influencer this way, right? And this is sort of the world, how I see the world. I think influencers are audiences, they're channels, they're creatives, they're advocates, right? So I'm in that broadened view of influencer. Clients influence me at times, influence my thinking as well. So I think I sort of seek inspiration from lots of different places. But that's sort of, from my perspective, I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but what's changed a bit in this sort of squirrely world of influence, it's the fact that, if I look at influencer through those 4 different lenses, it'll change the way I leverage advocates, think about channel strategy, think about audiences very differently.
Ezra Klein was here yesterday and was talking about the difference between influence and persuasion. Mm-hmm. Persuasion, more often that you're trying to convince someone either that they're wrong or that you're right or whatever, and influence being more gradual, more incremental, showing people rather than telling them, sort of.
I think I agree with that. The one caveat I'd say is I think for influence over persuasion, I have to see myself in the advocate, right? I have to see myself in it a bit in order to respond to the influencer or to respond to the message. That's one. I agree with what Ezra said, but I think that's the one caveat I'd make for influence. And look, you have micro and nano and macro influencers, and all are relevant at various moments in time. But in order for influence and advocacy to work, I have to see myself in that, which I think is a big difference.
We've had a lot of conversations the last couple of days about the increasing desire by employees to see CEOs speak out on issues, right? Social issues in particular, particularly here in the U.S. But it's not just the U.S., it's also becoming more of a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Do you have OPRG employees who want you to speak out? And how do you counsel clients when or when not to be more vocal on social issues?
So it's a great question and a complicated one for me for where I sit in the holding company. I don't want to. Yes, there are times that employees want me to speak out, 100%, and I do and I will. However, I do want my agency CEOs to have voice, and I don't want to overshadow that at times, right? So sometimes it's even more impactful for audiences to hear from their direct CEO over holding company CEO. So I think that's a little bit of a balance. When clients ask, it's interesting. I encourage a level of authenticity, right? I don't think we're in an environment where, I'm not credible on every issue. But there are times when I need a minute to think about exactly what I'm going to say. And I'll tell you an interesting story about this. And in the spring of 2020, May, when we were dealing with, the George Floyd issue and everything that ensued, I was one of the only Black CEOs of a company at the time where I managed, and there was a lot of pressure for me to come out immediately with some statement and some motivational thing or whatever that was, and I needed a minute, and with every day I waited. You remember this probably, Paris. With every day I waited before I said something, the employee base got more and more agitated. But really wouldn't give me a chance. And I finally came out, probably about 4 days later, after the incident, and sort of talked about what was going on for me. And it was so deeply personal that I needed a minute to actually get the words right. And I also needed a minute to decide if I was going to let that moment, if I was going to be hopeful, or if I was going to allow myself to be hopeful that this is a catalyst for real change and enduring change. But no one wanted to give me the space to sort of figure that out. So once I laid it out for everyone, they kind of sort of got it and understood, and we moved on in our way. But I share that to say, we do the best we can as CEOs. But the issues that our employees and constituents want us to comment on are oftentimes as deeply personal for us as they are for them. And sometimes finding the words and the balance between our roles as corporate stewards with commitments to shareholders and staff and employees to the role I play as dad requires more than a statement that's written for me. So I have these conversations with the CEOs and boards that I work with, and they find great comfort in it. Because they're wrestling with the same thing. Now, ultimately, we've got to move a little faster because we have responsibilities, but I don't always encourage us to keep pace with expectations. I'd rather get it right, and I'd rather us be authentic to who we are than just getting something out there, because it can cause more harm.
Can I ask you what you said, and was it mostly for an internal audience or external or both?
So I thought it was internal. Then it leaked, but I didn't care. It was mainly for an internal audience, but it was very sincere, and it was relevant, and I found it to be comforting outside of the organization as well, so I was fine. I expected it to move, as I think all of my communications and moves in the organization outside, so I was prepared for it. Yeah.
And when you felt that, that's obviously personally relevant, right?
Sure.
That's immediate for you, the George Floyd murder. Are there issues where you don't feel, you mentioned, it's got to be authentic. What do you do when, somebody wants you to speak out about something that you don't feel is really authentic for the company? How do you handle that? Do you just decline politely, or do you have to go an extra step and explain why you don't?
I think it's gone are the days where no comment's a comment, right? So I think we're better off explaining and providing context to why it may not be relevant for us to comment or what I'm thinking about particularly. So I try to I think it's important, and I do advise our clients to go the extra mile, certainly internally, so staff understand why we're making certain decisions, where we think we're credible, where we think our voice can add influence, and where we think it won't and may distract from a global conversation or a national conversation. This is where the truth is actually good. You know what I mean? So, and being grounded in purpose and values and who you are is really the North Star for when and where we should engage in some of these national and global debates. And I think oftentimes we lose that North Star. But I try to, when I work with clients and internally, I try to focus on that.
We're really happy to have people back in person
after
sort of hybrid conferences and such the last few years. How did you manage, because you came in 2 years ago, right? Almost at the tail end of COVID. How have you seen your employees' work routines or habits change? And are some of those temporary still, or are they going to be permanent, do you think?
Oh, Brian. So here's where we are, right? It's a journey, right? Our aspiration across Omnicom is to have staff in offices 3 days a week, and choose those days and the like. What I've done is I don't think it's my what I try to do is provide the agency CEOs guidance. Here's what I'd love to see it happen. But at the end of the day, I want them to do what's best for their business within the construct of the guidance we provided Omnicom. And that worked for a while, and I think, I think we've relied on technology and we've proven that technology works to get the job done. But I think there are 2 or 3 problems I see that worry me. One, I don't like going into an office and then I'm on Teams in an office. Just find that to be sort of counterintuitive. I'd kind of rather stay home. So there's that, which is sort of frustrating to me. But I also feel like there is something, especially for our industry and advisory services, there is something magical about the interaction you'll have, in an elevator or walk into a meeting or immediately following a meeting to give someone guidance or counsel feedback. So I do worry about the mentoring. I worry about the generation that only sees one of my agencies through Teams or Zoom and hasn't been in a building, hasn't had an opportunity to interact with managers. That sort of worries me a bit. So, and I think a lot of our senior managers are starting to see that as well, and wanting to drive that level of engagement, for culture, but also for mentorship. I don't want to lose a generation. I don't think we're going to go back, and I don't think we need to, truthfully, to 5 days a week in the office, and then sort of weekends and all that things that we used to do back in the old days. I don't think we need to do that. But I would like the moments to be relevant when we're in offices. I want to convene people. I've started convening my leadership team more regularly. And we've lifted the vaccine mandates, which I'm hoping will encourage people, and we're trying all sorts of different, programs. This is where, truthfully, we're listening to employees. They're probably tired of telling us, but we're trying to listen and get feedback as to, what they want and how we balance it out. But it's a journey. I don't think we've nailed it. I don't think anyone's nailed it. And I think we'll probably, the next 18 months, I think will be a fairly significant shift. Because remember, we sent everyone home, like over a 1 week period, and now it's not like we're going to all come back that way. So I think we're reimagining the future of work. We're reimagining our employees' relationship to offices, and challenging some of the sensibilities about how we manage staff, which I think is going to be a good journey. Management doesn't have all the answers. We're going to need to lean on employees as well.
One of the things I loved back in the day was, when Harold Burson would come in the office.
Yeah.
Right? And he would tell stories, and I'm not sure if you had Harold on a Zoom call, he would, break off into a story. It tends to be,
he could,
much more business focused, and you don't get those sort of
you don't get
hallway
the
chats, right? Which are great.
You have to schedule time to give someone feedback, and it just feels like a lot.
You're working on a second book.
I am.
Hey, tell us about your first book, and then how you're thinking about the second book.
So the first book was a book about reputation strategy and analytics. It's interesting. When I was at Booz Allen, I had an opportunity to lead, the analytics business, and I learned a lot about analytics and data science. That's how I learned. I'm not an engineer or anything like that by any stretch, but I became so curious around data and how data, is used in multiple different settings that I tried to make the connection at that time. This is back in 2017. Between data and communications, and how it directly impacts the way we manage reputations and do reputation management. So that was what the first book was. And I think I wanted to write a book that was a quick read. You can sort of read it on a flight from JFK to London and not get too bogged down. And tried to bring voices in the industry to the book so it wasn't just me. By the way, finding enough content for a book is tough. So what I'm looking at now is I think there's something, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm on this journey, within the way we practice reputation strategy, and even brand management, looking at the generations, Gen X, Gen Y, the millennials. And I believe that, and I'm a Gen X, I think we've been the most largely misunderstood and ignored generation, out over the last, 50 years. So there's something I'm trying to look at with how we practice communications through the construct of the generations, and is there any difference? We'll see where we land.
How do you make sense of the question of influence between someone of my generation, for example, and somebody who's your son's age, right? He, I'm guessing, unlike me, probably doesn't read a physical newspaper every day, et cetera. Right. And he's probably influenced in various ways that I'm not, right, online, et cetera.
I think you were of a similar age. I don't think we realize how much influence you really do have over that 17 or 18-year-old or the 21-year-old. They want to be seen. They're interacting with content, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or whatever the platform is, and then they want to talk about it. So what I'm seeing is what's happening in that virtual world coming into the physical world. And that's exciting because it's forcing a different level of conversation with between Gen X and the millennials or what's before them, the net gen, than we would have had before, because they're just getting access to so much information, and some of it is confusing and sometimes misunderstood. So I've become, I think, and this is maybe me being delusional, that I'm like an influencer over my son and his friends. We'll see. Maybe I'm not. They're just faking me out.
Last question, I want to go to questions from
Sure.
the audience. When you worked at Booz Allen, right, and a lot of the consulting firms are Page members, so I want to be thoughtful about the question and the answer. They seem to be very good at getting into the C-suite and influencing the executives on a
Booz
broad...
or management consultants?
Just management consultants
Sure.
in general, McKinsey, Booz, et cetera.
Yep.
And influencing the C-suite with arguments, persuasion, data, business trends, et cetera, whereas the public relations industry and firms have a more of a challenge
Sure.
doing that. How do we what can we learn based on your experience from those consulting firms that just makes them a must-read by the C-suite, where maybe it's me, but I sort of feel like we're almost bashful about introducing big ideas to the C-suite?
No, it was sort of a great 6-year tour in consulting firms, and great deal of respect for all of them, whether it's Accenture, McKinsey, BCG, Booz. There's one difference that I've noticed. There are probably a few. As practitioners, we try to go into C-suites and boards and sell something. Right? We've got some deck, we've got some object, we've got some new capability we've created off in a conference room. Oftentimes we have a solution looking for a problem. And what I think the consulting folks do very skillfully is have the confidence in the bench and have the confidence in the intellectual capital that's been created, and spending more time trying to listen and diagnose problems. That goes back to the problem diagnosis. That's one of the fundamentals. So then, I show up to CEO Brian and I've got an elegant presentation with a new capability that I'm told is going to be so relevant to you, and then you look at me curious as to, well, that's not even what I'm focused on today, and then we're stuck. Instead of listening to you and trying to, understand a little differently what the problems are you're facing as an enterprise, and trying to link us to that.
Okay. I think we've got a virtual question.
Virtual question.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Good to be here with you today. I'm sponsored today by the University of Kentucky. I don't know if anybody has any pull, but I thought maybe we could get a discount by being on the screen. So DM me later on that if you have any pull. This isn't really a question, Chris. It's more of a comment. I love what you said about taking time following George Floyd's murder to gather your thoughts on how you wanted to respond. And in my opinion, it's so important to not be expedient as CCOs, as advising leaders when responding to significant issues, because that quick emotional reaction can have unintended consequences. I do think, however, that really fast acknowledgement is critical, letting your stakeholders know that you're aware of what's going on, so there isn't that deafening silence. But then the reactive, personalized response could follow, shortly thereafter. But I really like what you said about that, and I really enjoyed the conversation and the conference. Kudos to Page, as always, for allowing us virtually to participate.
No, because I think you raise a good point about context, but also acknowledging a little bit of work in progress. So good point. Thank you for that. Good to see you.
Last question for you in terms of maybe your role as CEO and as you interact with other CEOs. What's the most important quality a CEO has to have?
There are a few, but I think in today's age, a high emotional IQ is important, right? For how we lead and inspire teams, how we advise and partner with clients, and how we manage business. I think there's more that's being asked of CEOs today than ever before. To be human, to be personal, to be, the expectations have evolved. So I think a high IQ, EQ is quite important.
And do you give yourself permission to shut down on the weekend or late at night? I mean, what's the CEO's job never
Depends if it's
never stops,
quarter end,
right?
or if we have earnings or what. I do. No, look, here's my view on that, right? I believe if you set boundaries, the organizations will respect them. Right? If you don't, then they won't. So as much as I love what I do, and it rarely turns off, I do try. Sometimes I'm more successful, sometimes I'm less successful, to create some fairly firm boundaries for me to exercise. But I'm also quite transparent about it as CEO. I'll tell people, look, I'm on the Peloton, and I just need like 30 minutes to get right. And it may be frustrating at times, but maybe that'll inspire someone else to do that, or so I try to be pretty transparent about that.
No, it's great because employees are looking for you to give them permission to take time off, right? If they see you constantly working.
After they do the work and build the charge the time, yeah. I'm kidding.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Great to see you.
Yeah,
big round of applause for Chris Foster.
Thank you. I'm going to close up.